because you had so many bank runs and problems with these kind of exchanges, custodial type things, you've actually seen a really sharp uptick in the number of people holding Bitcoin on chain. And so if you look at small users, people that own maybe one Bitcoin or half a Bitcoin or 2 or 3 Bitcoin, a lot of those have actually taken their coins off exchanges and held them in a hardware wallet. That's one of the more bullish catalysts out there that I think that people are kind of seeing the usefulness of Bitcoin as a self-custodial peer-to-peer type of money, even though in the price sense, as a piece of collateral, as a piece of leverage that is getting kind of forced sold in this kind of casino of broad crypto, I think that's the bearish part. But I think the underlying fundamentals that are happening, I still think long-term are bullish.
Hello and welcome to Wealthy Value. In today's video, popular Bitcoin and stock market analyst Lyn Alden updates about Bitcoin's recent crashes, impact of Luna's collapse, and rising turbulence in the markets. She also talks about whether or not we are at the Bitcoin bottom, chances of a capitulation event, and why more pain is on the horizon for Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. Make sure to stick around till the end of this video where Lyn Alden explains why she expects an explosive recovery in the Bitcoin markets and why the next 4 to 6 months are important for the crypto space. By the way, are you losing money because of a crypto market downturn? With Margex trading platform, you can open long and short positions so that you can profit even during falling markets. Margex has been nominated by finance magnates as the most user-friendly trading platform. Cross margin is available on all assets, and you can trade with up to 100x leverage. Keep in mind that leverage trading involves risks. That's why if you don't feel confident enough, you can trade with small amounts. The minimum deposit is only $10 and minimum trade size is $1. You will never find any hidden commissions on Margex, and all deal indicators are on screen and available in real time. It's possible to use 10 cryptocurrencies as a deposit option. For a limited time, you can get a 15% bonus on your deposit. First, sign up through the link in the description. Make a deposit of $300 or more, enter your promo code on the wallet page, and get a bonus of 15% on your deposit amount up to $10,000. And now, back to our video.
It's always hard to say if you're at the ultimate bottom or not, but this does look a lot like the late 2018 capitulation where Bitcoin, for a while, Bitcoin was kind of stabilizing around 6,000, and then it just out of nowhere got cut in half, down to almost 3,000 when you had the Fed tightening and you had, problems in credit markets and you had this kind of contagion. And so I think that we've gone through a similar capitulation now where, Bitcoin looked like it was trying to bottom around 30,000, it was kind of that level environment, and then out of nowhere, it got just completely capitulated down to sub 20,000. So I by most metrics, it's in a pretty deep value zone, right? So it's below the average on-chain cost basis. It touched below the 200-week moving average, which it almost never does. Basically, we've had a lot of forced selling. I mean, generally, you want to be a buyer during forced selling and a trimmer when everyone's euphoric. So I think that if I were to look back 3 to 5 years from now, I would not be surprised. I'd be mostly confident this is probably going to look at a pretty significant buying opportunity in Bitcoin. But I do think that people have to be aware that it might not be over. There could be more pain ahead. I think the macro situation is still kind of going to be struggling for a number of months here, and so I'm not necessarily expecting any sort of explosive recovery anytime soon. But I do think that any interested people might want to look into the space, because I think this is a time to consider start laying capital in, or to start maybe building up a position, or at least studying it to see if it's something you eventually want to go into. Because I first bought Bitcoin during the it was April 2020, so we were just coming out of that whole COVID crash, and that was the last time, that was the 4th time ever that Bitcoin was below its on-chain cost basis. And now it's the 5th time, and so in many ways it looks like that earlier type of environment. And so I'm pretty optimistic long term on where we are now, while still cautioning that the next 3 to 6 months, anything can really go when you're in this type of weak economic environment with low liquidity. And I think the last 10,000 move was somewhat surprising to me. I think that was below my base case. I would not have been surprised to see us go below 30. I think going below 20 what was a deeper capitulation than I would have guessed several months ago. And for people who've been following my work, generally, Bitcoin and cryptos do well in rising PMI environments. So Purchasing Managers Index, economic acceleration, they usually do well in that kind of environment. And then they usually do poorly or sideways in declining PMI environments, economic contraction type of environments. And those are generally these like 3-year cycles that the global economy goes through, US economy, global economy. And so, I had been getting cautious in the tactical sense about the fact that we were going through a declining PMI environment, and then therefore that can put a lot of pressures on Bitcoin, despite the fact that I would say still structurally long-term bullish on it, but then being aware of that kind of downside. And then in particular when Luna started buying Bitcoin, so Luna Foundation Guard, I started to kind of write about a potential scenario where they totally implode and they end up having to sell their Bitcoin into a weak market, capitulation. And that's unfortunately what we saw in May. Now, the deeper leg that I didn't necessarily expect was the implosion of 3 Hours Capital. So basically, there's more contagion in the space. There's really kind of a follow-on. It was kind of the second part of that Luna collapse, right? So for example, there's a proprietary trading company, 3 Hours Capital, that they had over 10 billion in capital at their peak, and they were heavily impaired by the Luna implosion. They also had leverage out from multiple different shops. It's pretty opaque leverage, and they used Bitcoin as collateral mostly to trade altcoins. And so they're not like making leverage bets on Bitcoin, but they're using Bitcoin as collateral to go out and buy other things. And they basically just ran into massive issues and got liquidated. And so there's all this kind of forced selling of Bitcoin, total capitulation in cryptos. A number of companies went bankrupt or near bankrupt, had all sorts of liquidity crises. You have a lot of entities that are busy forced selling. And so this is the one, Luna was something that I wrote about and expected and cautioned about, where something more opaque like 3 Hours Capital is kind of the second leg to that. It's just that one's harder to predict. And so I think the environment we're in now is that we've had a pretty deep capitulation. Bitcoin had less of a blow off top in the cycle. Most of the blow off top was in other things like Dogecoin or some of these like either meme coins or some of the smart contract platforms. Bitcoin itself had more of a rolling top, so I was kind of as a base case maybe expecting it not to capitulate as much as it did in some of its prior cycles. That was before the whole 3 Hours Capital implosion. It was kind of the second leg of that divestiture. So basically, given how low sentiment was, and given what was happening with inflation in a number of markets, I was kind of expecting that upper 20s position might hold. I was, the way I was analyzing with my client was saying that I think this is a reasonable value zone. It's not a deep value zone. It's not a capitulation. And I kind of kept looking back at that 2018 chart and being like, this, you could have a pretty violent. So I wasn't ruling out this kind of final capitulation type of phase, but wasn't necessarily expecting it either. But now that we've gotten it, I am kind of more confident than I was a number of months ago about kind of recommending that people at least consider looking into layering in or researching the protocol just to see if it's something that they're interested in. Basically, I think that now we have a pretty severe washout in terms of liquidated leverage, forced sellers. This is the time where I don't mind picking some up and kind of being on the other side of that trade. I mean capitulation is basically an explosive type of bottom where you go down to what roughly ends up being kind of a bottoming zone very quickly. Whether or not that is the precise bottom or not, as I think, not like as you pointed out, that's not the main question. The question is the worst of it behind us, right? And so obviously we won't know until years in advance what the actual bottom was. When you have forced selling, when you have bank runs, when you have just basically uncontrolled liquidations, that's the type of event that usually marks a capitulation. Whereas when you look back at the 2018 Bitcoin price action, you had that kind of deep capitulation, but it's not as though you got some rapid bounce back. You stayed down there and chopped along sideways for a long period of time. I forget exactly what day the bottom occurred on. And of course, even you recovered and then chopped along, and then a couple years later during the COVID, you actually kind of went back down briefly to roughly where that bottom was. You kind of very briefly retested those types of 2018 bottoming zones. So a bottoming can be a process. But I would describe capitulation as kind of this like explosive moment of forced selling, a lot of kind of previously high conviction entities throwing in the towel, sentiment bottoming out, and then kind of being able to at least start the process of reconstruction, which might not mean the bottom's in, but I think that means that the explosive selling might be behind us. Like I said before, this is the 5th time in Bitcoin's history where it's below average on-chain cost basis.
So, do you agree with Lyn Alden that the worst is not over yet for Bitcoin? Tell us in the comments. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you soon with the next video. Thank you so much for watching.